They had conquered 1,000 worlds before they found Earth's children among the stars. Their empire stretched across 3 galactic arms, and in all that time, across all those worlds, they had never lost a single invasion. The reason was simple. They did not fight fair. They fought smart. Their ships were beautiful in a terrible way. Long and silver, they moved through space like living things, like great fish swimming through an ocean of nothing. Inside those ships, they floated. They had evolved on a world with almost no gravity, a small moon orbiting a gas giant where the pull of the ground was so weak that their ancestors had simply floated up and never come back down. Over millions of years, they had become creatures of the void. Their bodies were thin and long, with 8 limbs that spread out like the branches of a tree. Their bones were hollow and light, made of something that looked like crystal but bent instead of breaking. Their skin was a thin membrane stretched over those bones, almost see-through, with colors shifting beneath like oil on water. In zero gravity, they were perfect. They could push off a wall and glide for 100 meters without touching anything. They could spin and twist and change direction in ways that other species could only dream of. Their 8 limbs let them grab, push, climb, and fight all at the same time. They were predators designed for a world without up or down, and they had learned long ago that the best way to win a war was to make every battlefield their kind of world. When they invaded, they did not land on planets. They did not fight on the ground. They targeted space stations, ships, and orbital platforms. The first thing they did was kill the gravity. Every species they had encountered used spinning rings or magnetic floors or some other trick to create fake gravity in space. They had become experts at breaking those systems. A few well-placed missiles, a hack into the engineering computers, or sometimes just waiting until the defenders were asleep and then cutting the power. It did not matter how. What mattered was the result. Without gravity, everything changed. Species that had evolved on planets with strong gravity suddenly found themselves floating, spinning, helpless. They could not walk. They could not run. When they tried to fight, they pushed themselves backward with every punch. When they tried to shoot, the recoil sent them tumbling. They vomited from the sickness that came with falling forever. They could not tell which way was up. They grabbed at walls and each other, panicking, while they flowed through the corridors like water through pipes. They had a word for this moment. In their language, it meant something like the great equalizing or the removal of advantage. In the dark corridors of disabled stations, all species became prey. They became the only predators. This was how they came to Prometheus 7. Prometheus 7 was a research station in a quiet corner of human-controlled space. It was not a military target. It was not strategically important. It was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, floating in a system that the Dominion had decided to claim. The station was shaped like a wheel, spinning slowly to create gravity for the 200 humans who lived and worked inside. They were scientists mostly, studying the strange radiation that came from a nearby neutron star. They had families. They had projects. They had morning coffee in the cafeteria and arguments about whose turn it was to clean the laboratory equipment. They were not soldiers. When the ships appeared on their sensors, they had 4 hours to prepare. It was not enough. The station had a small security team, 20 people with light weapons designed to handle the occasional pirate or desperate refugee. They had never trained for a real invasion. None of them had ever been in a real fight. The head of security, a tired man named Tors, spent those 4 hours trying to organize a defense while knowing in his heart that it would not matter. They sent distress signals, but help was days away. They sealed the important sections and distributed weapons to anyone who would take them. They told everyone to magnetic lock their boots and prepare for zero gravity because they knew what they did. Everyone knew. The stories had spread through human space like wildfire. The ghost ships found drifting with everyone dead. The stations that went silent and stayed silent. The few survivors who had been left alive to tell the tale, their minds broken by what they had seen. Myra was in the engineering section when the attack began. She was 43 years old, with gray starting to show in her black hair and lines around her eyes from too many years of squinting at screens. She had been an engineer her whole adult life. She had built things, fixed things, and kept things running when they wanted to break down. She had never fired a weapon at another living being. She had never wanted to. When the missiles hit, she felt the station shudder. The lights flickered, then the spinning stopped. It happened slowly at first. The wheel that was Prometheus 7 had been turning for 15 years, building up momentum that did not want to stop, but they knew their work. They had hit the systems that controlled the spin, damaged the bearings that kept the wheel turning smoothly. Over the course of 20 minutes, Myra felt the gravity fade. First it became lighter, like she was on the moon instead of Earth. Then lighter still. Her tools started to float off her workbench. Her coffee lifted out of its cup in a perfect sphere, wobbling in the air like a magic trick. Then there was nothing. She was floating, and so was everything else. Around her she heard the sounds of chaos, people crying out, things crashing as they came loose from their places. Someone was sick, and she heard the wet sound of it somewhere to her left. The emergency lights came on, painting everything in red. Myra grabbed a handhold on the wall and steadied herself. Unlike many of her colleagues, she had spent time in zero gravity before. Not a lot, but enough. She knew how to move, how to push gently and guide herself through the air. She knew that panicking would only make things worse. She also knew something else. She knew every system on the station. The security channel crackled in her earpiece. Torres was giving orders, his voice tight with fear he was trying to hide. He was telling people to fall back, to barricade, to wait for rescue. Myra listened, but she was also thinking. She was looking at the engineering console in front of her, at the readouts and diagrams that showed every system on Prometheus 7. They had broken the spin, but they had not broken everything. The station was wounded, but it was not dead. She started to work. On the other side of the station, they were coming through the airlocks. Their breaching pods had attached to the outer hull like parasites, burning through the metal with plasma torches that cut perfect circles. When the circles fell inward, they poured through. They did not walk. They flowed. Their 8 limbs grabbed and pushed and pulled, sending them gliding through the corridors at speeds that no human could match. Their eyes were large and dark, designed to see in the dim light of space. Their mouths were small, almost invisible, because they did not need to breathe air or eat solid food. They absorbed nutrients through their skin, filtered from the liquid they floated in when they were at home. The first humans they encountered did not last long. A security officer named Park tried to fight. He had locked his magnetic boots to the floor, planted himself like he had been taught, and raised his rifle. He managed to fire 3 shots. The recoil twisted him despite the boots. His shots went wide, punching holes in the walls but hitting nothing important. Before he could fire again, 2 were on him. Their limbs wrapped around his arms, his rifle, his throat. They moved like dancers, using his own struggles against him, letting his movements send them both spinning while they squeezed. It was over in seconds. In the cafeteria, a group of scientists tried to hide. They found them anyway. They always found everyone. Myra watched it happen on the security feeds. Her hands were shaking, but they kept working. She was not looking at the screens because she wanted to. She was looking because she needed to understand. She needed to see how they moved, how they fought, what they could do. She watched them glide through corridors, watched them push off walls and ceilings with perfect efficiency, watched them never once touch the floor. That was when she noticed it, the thing that would change everything. They never touched the floor, not once. They pushed off walls, grabbed handholds, bounced off ceilings, but the floor meant nothing to them. Why would it? In zero gravity, there was no floor. There was no up or down. The floor was just another surface, no different from any other. But to humans, the floor was everything. It was where they stood, where they walked, where they lived their entire lives, pressed down by a force so constant that they forgot it was even there. Gravity. Myra stopped working on the defenses she had been trying to build. She started working on something else entirely. Deep in the station's core, there was a system that had never been used. It was an emergency backup, designed for a disaster that had never happened. A ring of massive flywheels, built to spin so fast that they could simulate gravity through sheer rotational force. It was meant to be a last resort, a way to save the station if the main spin systems failed completely. No one had ever activated it. No one had ever needed to. Myra began the startup sequence. On the security channel, she heard Tor's scream, then silence. They were getting closer. She could see them on the feeds, flowing toward the engineering section, toward her. Their movements were beautiful and horrible, like watching predators hunt. She did not have much time. Her fingers flew over the controls. Warning messages appeared, telling her that the system was not designed for combat conditions, that the flywheels needed time to spin up, that the structural stress could damage the station. She dismissed them all. She did not have time for warnings. Behind her, she heard the sound of metal being cut. They had found her door. Through the small window, she could see the glow of a plasma torch, cutting a circle that would soon fall inward. Soon they would be inside. Soon they would be on her, wrapping those long limbs around her throat like they had done to so many others. Myra kept working. The flywheels were spinning up, building speed, building force. 20%, 30%. The station began to vibrate, a deep hum that she could feel in her bones. The circle in the door began to fall. 50%, 60%. They were coming through, their bodies unfolding into the room like flowers blooming in fast motion. Myra looked at them, they looked at her. For a moment there was silence. Then she smiled. "Let me show you," she said, "what humans are made for." She pressed the final button. The flywheels reached full speed, and gravity came crashing down. The first thing that happened was sound. A deep groaning noise filled the station, the sound of metal and plastic and glass adjusting to forces they had not felt in hours. The walls creaked. The floor settled. Loose objects that had been floating peacefully through the air suddenly remembered which way was down. Then came the screaming. The strike commander Al had been leading the assault on the engineering section personally. In 500 years of war, he had never encountered prey that required his personal attention. He had come to this small human station expecting the same easy victory his forces had won countless times before. The reports from his forward units confirmed what he already knew. The humans were helpless. They tumbled through the air, unable to control their own bodies. Their weapons were useless. Their defenses were a joke. This would be finished within the hour. He had been floating through the door of the engineering room, his 8 limbs spread wide to catch the frame and launch himself toward the lone human female who stood at the console. His warriors were flowing in behind him, a perfect formation that would surround her before she could react. Everything was going exactly as planned. Then the world changed. Al had never experienced gravity before. His species had evolved without it, lived without it, conquered without it. He had no frame of reference for what was happening, no instinct that told him what to do. One moment he was gliding forward in complete control of his body. The next moment, an invisible hand grabbed him and threw him at the floor with terrible force. He did not fall gracefully. He had never fallen before. His limbs, which had been spread wide for maneuvering, could not react in time to catch him. His hollow crystal bones, which were perfect for pushing and grabbing, were never designed to support weight. When he hit the deck plating, he hit it hard. His left forearm shattered on impact, the crystalline structure cracking like thin ice under a boot. His body crumpled, his other limbs folding under him at wrong angles. He tried to push himself up, but his arms would not work the way they should. Everything was too heavy. His own body was too heavy. Behind him, he heard his warriors hitting the ground. The sounds were terrible, cracking and snapping and wet tearing noises as their bodies broke under the sudden weight. The membrane skin was designed to stretch and flex in zero gravity, allowing for maximum range of motion. Under gravity, it tore like wet paper. Their hollow bones broke and kept breaking, splintering under the constant pressure. One of his warriors tried to stand. She managed to get 2 limbs under herself, pushing upward with all her strength. For a moment, she actually rose a few inches off the floor. Then her arm bones gave way, shattered by a force they had never been built to handle, and she collapsed again. She did not try a second time. Al forced himself to think past the pain. He was Strike Commander. He had led armies. He had conquered worlds. He would not die on the floor of a human station, crushed by nothing more than his own weight. He looked up at the human female. She was standing. The word meant nothing to Al's species. They did not stand. They floated, gripped, pushed, glided. Standing was something that species with gravity did and that had never needed to learn it. But now, looking at this human, Al began to understand what the word truly meant. She was holding herself upright against the same force that was crushing him into the floor. Her 2 legs, thick and muscular compared to his slender limbs, were planted firmly beneath her. Her spine was straight. Her head was up. She looked down at him with an expression he could not read on her alien face, and she did not seem to be struggling at all. How was this possible? The gravity was not selective. It was pressing down on her just as hard as it was pressing down on him. She should be crawling on the floor beside him, helpless and broken. Instead, she walked toward him. She lifted 1 leg, moved it forward, put it down, then the other. It looked so simple, so easy, like she had done it a million times before. Because she had. All humans had. They had been doing it their whole lives on a planet that pulled at them every second of every day. Myra stopped in front of the commander. He was larger than her, his body spread across the floor in a tangle of broken limbs. His membrane skin had torn in several places, and something that might have been blood was leaking out, dark purple against the metal floor. His eyes, large and dark and built for seeing in the void, looked up at her with something she recognized. Fear. They were afraid. She crouched down beside him. It was not easy. The artificial gravity was stronger than Earth normal and her knees ached with the strain. But she had lived with gravity her whole life. A little extra weight was uncomfortable. To these creatures, it was death. "You don't understand, do you?" she said. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. "You came here thinking we were weak. You took away our gravity because you thought that would make us helpless." She reached out and picked up a tool that had fallen near his head. It was heavy in her hand, much heavier than it should have been. She turned it over, looking at it, then set it down on his chest. He gasped, a wet rattling sound as the weight pressed down on him. "My species evolved on a planet with 10 times the gravity of your home," she said. "Every day of our existence we carried our own weight. We carried the weight of everything we touched. We built our bodies to push against a force that never stopped trying to push us down." She stood up again, rising smoothly despite the extra gravity. "You evolved to be light, to float, to never carry anything at all." She looked around the room at the elite warriors who had conquered 1,000 worlds. They lay scattered across the floor like broken toys, their bodies crumpled and still. Some of them were trying to move, dragging themselves with limbs that could barely function. None of them were standing. "This is what we live with," Myra said. "Every moment, every day, from birth until death. We stand up against it. We walk through it. We run and jump and dance, and gravity pulls at us the whole time, and we barely even notice." She walked to the door, stepping carefully over the broken bodies. In the corridor beyond, she could hear more sounds, more screaming, more cracking. The gravity was affecting every on the station, all of them experiencing weight for the first time in their evolution. Behind her, Al managed to speak. His voice was weak, damaged, filtered through a translator that turned his species' radio frequency communication into sound waves that humans could hear. "How," he said, "how do you live like this?" Myra paused at the door. She did not turn around. "We don't know any other way," she said. "This is normal to us, being crushed every second by our own planet. We're built for it. We're strong because we had to be strong just to exist." She looked back over her shoulder, just for a moment. You should have checked what we evolved in before you came here. Then she walked away, leaving the strike commander of the Dominion lying broken on the floor of a research station, defeated by nothing more than the weight of his own body. The next few hours changed everything. Throughout Prometheus 7, the story was the same. Warriors who had been gliding through corridors with perfect lethal grace suddenly found themselves on the floor, unable to move. The humans they had been hunting were no longer helpless. They were walking, standing, moving with purpose through the heavy air while their would-be conquerors lay broken around them. The security team, what was left of it, went from section to section. They did not need to fight. They only needed to walk. They could not resist. They could barely breathe. Some of them were already dead, their internal organs crushed by the weight of their own bodies. Others were dying slowly, their crystalline bones grinding against each other with every tiny movement. A young engineer named found 3 in the power distribution center. They had been trying to shut down the station's reactor when the gravity came back. Now they lay in a pile near the main console, their limbs tangled together, their membrane skin torn and leaking. One of them was still alive, barely, making small clicking sounds that the translator could not interpret. Looked at them for a long moment. Then he stepped over them and started working on the console. The station needed power. That was more important. In the medical bay, Doctor found herself treating humans who had been injured in the initial attack. The gravity made everything harder. Equipment was heavier. Patients could not be easily moved. But it was still possible. It was still medicine. She worked and she swore and she saved the people she could save. When one of her nurses asked about whether they should try to help them too, thought about it for a moment. Then she shook her head. Their biology is too different, she said. I don't know how to treat them. And honestly, I don't think there's anything we could do. The gravity is killing them, and we can't turn it off without putting everyone back in danger. She did not say what she was really thinking. That part of her, a part she was not proud of, did not want to help them. They had come to kill her people. They had killed her people, good people, friends. Now they were dying, and she could not bring herself to care. She went back to work on the patients she could help. Myra made her way to what was left of the bridge. The command center had been one of the first places hit, and the damage was extensive. Torres was dead, his body lying against a wall where they had left him. 3 other officers were dead too, but the communications console was still working barely, and that was what Myra needed. She sat down at the console, feeling the chair creak under the extra gravity. Her body was tired. Her muscles ached. She had been running on adrenaline and fear for hours, and now that the immediate danger was past, she could feel exhaustion creeping in. But she was not done yet. The fleet was still out there, waiting in orbit around the station. They would be wondering why their boarding parties had gone silent. They would be sending more troops soon, or deciding to destroy the station entirely. She needed to stop that from happening. She opened a channel to the fleet. Dominion vessels, she said. Her voice was steady, calmer than she felt. This is Chief Engineer Myra of Research Station Prometheus 7. Your boarding parties have failed. Your warriors are dead or dying. If you send more, the same thing will happen to them. There was silence for a long moment. Then a voice came back, filtered through the translator. It was cold and flat, the voice of a commander who had never known defeat. You lie, the voice said. Our warriors are the finest in the galaxy. No human could defeat them. Myra had expected this. She had prepared for it. I'm going to send you something, she said. Watch it, then decide what you want to do. She transmitted the video file she had prepared. It showed the engineering room, the corridor outside, the medical bay, the cafeteria. It showed warriors lying broken on the floors, their bodies crushed by the weight that humans carried every day of their lives. It showed humans walking among them, standing over them, looking down at them. It showed Myra crouching beside Strike Commander Al, talking to him while he lay helpless at her feet. The silence after the transmission was longer this time, much longer. Finally, the voice came back. It was different now, smaller, less certain. "What did you do?" Myra leaned back in her chair. Outside the windows of the bridge, she could see the stars and beyond them the distant shapes of the ships. They seemed very far away now. "I turned on the gravity," she said simply. "That's all. I just turned on the gravity." Another pause, then. "You cannot turn off the gravity in your vessels. We will wait. We will attack when you sleep, when you lower your guard." Myra almost laughed. "You don't understand," she said. "We don't turn off our gravity. We don't want to turn it off. We need it. We evolved in it. What you experienced in the station, that crushing weight that broke your warriors, that's what we feel all the time. That's our normal." She stood up from the console, walked to the window, looked out at the stars. "We don't fear gravity. We are gravity. We carry it inside us everywhere we go, and if you come for us again, we'll bring it with us." The fleet before dawn. They left behind the wreckage of their boarding pods, the bodies of their warriors, and the beginning of a legend that would spread across the galaxy. The humans had turned gravity on, and the aliens had fallen. Myra stood at the window of the battered bridge and watched the silver shapes of the enemy ships disappear into the darkness between stars. Her legs hurt. Her back hurt. Her whole body felt like it had been pressed through a machine. But she was standing, the same way humans had always stood, against the weight of the world. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of recovery beginning. Voices calling to each other, equipment being moved. The slow, steady work of putting things back together. It would take time. They had lost people, good people, and that wound would not heal quickly. But they were alive. They were standing. They had won. Somewhere out there in the vast reaches of space, the word was spreading. They had been defeated. Not by weapons, not by tactics, not by any technology that other species could copy or steal. They had been defeated by gravity itself, by the simple weight of existence that every human carried from birth. The galaxy would remember, and the would never forget. In the years that followed, the incident at Prometheus 7 became a story that changed the way other species thought about humanity. Before, they had been seen as soft creatures, poorly adapted for space, too dependent on their heavy gravity to ever be a real threat. After, they were seen as something else entirely. Monsters born of crushing weight, beings who had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting against a force that would break most other species. Survivors of a world that tried to press them flat every moment of every day. The Dominion never invaded human space again. They learned, as other species would learn, that some prey was too dangerous to hunt. And Myra, the engineer who had pushed a button and changed history, went back to her research on neutron stars. She did not think of herself as a hero. She did not want statues or songs or medals. She had just done what needed to be done, the same way humans had always done what needed to be done. She had stood up. That was enough.